Alright, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast, BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Well, we've still got the rain in the background, and we're going to be talking about another two things today. Robert Christian Hansen, the serial killer from Anchorage, Alaska, known as the Butcher Baker, and the Zodiac Killer. Maybe some similarities between the two cases. Okay, so this was actually suggested to me by somebody writing in the comments section about looking into the possibility that Robert Christian Hansen was the Zodiac Killer. And as you see on this upload, this is part 2. During the first upload, we talked about a few similarities, but we also kind of highlighted some major differences. I mean, with these guys, first there's the instant similarity that both the Zodiac and Robert Hansen were said to hunt people down for sport. Both of them seem to have some sort of sexual animosity toward women, definitely some type of psychological similarities that are going on between the two guys. However, though, the things that would push against Robert Hansen being the Zodiac Killer is difficult to place him in the Bay Area at the time. I mean, if you're going to talk about kind of location, he left the lower 48 states in 1967 to move to Alaska, and of course, I was aware that you can fly down to San Francisco from Anchorage. It's not really impossible, right? I don't really have any reports of him doing that. First of all, though, that's not really as short of a flight as you think. I mean, I once flew from Seattle to Anchorage, and I was looking at the plane ticket, and I was like, what? 3.5 hours? I mean, that's just from Seattle to Anchorage. It looks like a small distance on the map, but it's a very large geographic distance. Going to San Francisco, I mean, would be much farther, and definitely not something you'd want to do on a weekend. But anyway, looking at some of the possibilities that we have going on with Robert Christian Hansen and the parallels between the Zodiac Killer as well as other serial killers. And I think that's kind of a good starting point here. When we're looking at these serial killer cases, we're going to find similarities with many different serial killers. But we talked before about the super conspiracies. Maybe that term isn't the exact right one to use here, but it's like once you start linking together different cases, it has a lower probability of being true. With the Zodiac Killer, we mentioned that with Ted Kaczynski. With the Zodiac Killer, we mentioned that with Bruce Davis. Trying to tie that stuff into the Manson family murders. Once you start linking together these major events, it has a lower likelihood of being true. And is that the case with Robert Hansen, the Anchorage Butcher Baker? It appears to be that a little bit. Other things we mentioned, Hansen shot his victims with a Ruger Mini 14 rifle. Robert Hansen disposed of the bodies in remote locations. I don't believe we have any reports of the Zodiac doing that. Whereas we do have the possibility that the Zodiac murdered as many as 37 people, but with the known victims, we definitely don't have those types of incidents. Also, here's one thing. When a sex worker would get into Robert Hansen's car, he would handcuff them immediately. He had one of the cuffs attached somewhere in the car, and then as soon as the girl would get in, he would just snap the cuff on her wrist. He said he could do it like a reflex. We don't really have those types of things with the Zodiac Killer. While there are some parallels between psychological issues, perhaps they both had some sort of animosity toward women, and also perhaps there's some type of sexual motivation. Not to mention it's this frustration that gets people to go out and start killing. That's actually a very big thing in the Lyndon Lafferty, George Russell Tucker theory. That one is like George Russell Tucker's wife was having an affair with a judge, and he was very devastated by that, and he actually became the Zodiac Killer as a way to sort of restore his ego, restore his sense of power, and also a way to get revenge on women because he felt he had been cheated. Just a theory. That's just the Lyndon Lafferty theory. It's the subject of the book The Silence Badge, also known as the Zodiac Killer Cover-Up. Very theoretical. But there are a lot of theories out there about the Zodiac Killer. And we really need to be aware that in the internet age, it's so easy to share information about these serial killer cases and be like, this serial killer might have also committed these crimes. There could be a certain likelihood that some of those things could be true, but also sometimes people are creating connections between these cases that might not be very accurate. I was just looking at something where they were saying that the 112 dirtbag, Alden Howes Olson from the Maura Murray case, shows direct similarities to the Zodiac Killer, even though he posted a video making fun of the Maura Murray case on the 8th anniversary. I guess that'd be 2012 or something like that. 2012? Maura Murray disappeared in 2004. I don't even think this guy is a family member that could possibly be the Zodiac Killer. But it's like, once again, it's the same model. You're taking true crime cases and trying to link them together with possibly fictitious connections, or inaccurate connections. Inaccurate might be the better word. So when we approach these things, I'm just kind of saying that it's going to be very natural for us to try and find these similarities between a lot of these cases. Look at the Zodiac Killer and the Texarkana Moonlight Murders, the Phantom Killer. Undeniable similarities and parallels between those two cases. It's like you have a guy targeting lovers' lanes, wearing a hooded mask. After he has killed 4 victims, he deviates from the pattern and begins targeting victims in a new place. With the Phantom Killer, he shot a husband and wife who were listening to a radio program in their living room. And with the Zodiac Killer, of course, the murder of Paul Stein, the taxi driver. Okay, so I've said very clearly on this channel that it's possible that the Zodiac Killer studied the Phantom Killer, studied the Texarkana Moonlight Murders, and was like, I can be a better serial killer than this guy. So that's one of the things that he used as a model in the Zodiac murders. However, though, if that's not the case, and I do mean this, if that's not the case, then there must be some extremely similar psychology going on with the Zodiac and the Phantom Killer. Those guys must have some extremely similar psychology. And that's just what I think we're going to be finding with a lot of individuals. I mean, Robert Hansen and the Zodiac have a little bit of similar psychological traits. They have a few things that are somewhat similar. But the issue is, you have kind of a different approach, the way that they're going about it. Once again, someone who's handcuffing people in his car, someone who is a rapist, versus some guy who is much more methodical, much more calculated, talking about the Zodiac. Now, yes, calculated. The kind of guy that would measure the exact length of materials that he needs to tie somebody up. But he's not putting bodies into his car or bodies onto his little bush plane and dumping them in far-off, secluded areas the way that Robert Hansen did. So once again, I see some similarities in kind of... I mean, there are going to be similarities. They're both serial killers. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're connected. I would say, though, that when it comes to psychological traits, I'm not a professional in that field. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a medical doctor. But I would just say there must be something going on. There must be something different with certain people and their sort of neurological functions, or the environment has some sort of impact on them that pushes them to become killers. Whereas, hey, did you have a perfect childhood, whoever you are? Probably you didn't. But if you're listening to this, probably you haven't killed anyone either. It's like, what is that sort of psychological break that people have? What is the sort of difference between someone who had bad experiences and doesn't lead to this life of extreme violence and murder and rape and abuse, and people who do not have that? So I'm really just thinking that when we're going to have a lot of these high-profile serial killer cases, like we also talked about Albert Fish on the previous upload, I think there are going to be enormous similarities between a lot of these serial killers. It's just that it doesn't necessarily mean that we can connect them together and be like, well, there's some things going on here that look similar to this case, therefore these two serial killers must have been the same person. And I think we're going to be getting a lot of that on the internet. And especially with these high-profile serial killer cases, because I think it'll be a little bit easier than some of the other things. It's like, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to be wrong. I mean, I said it's very possible the Zodiac Killer could have studied the Texarkana Moonlight Murders. I don't believe, though, that somebody like Robert Hansen would have even studied the Zodiac Killer murders. I mean, I just don't see similarities in his work. He did not compose ciphers. He did not call the police and send letters to newspapers. None of that's going on. So, once again, yeah, okay, some things seem a little bit similar, but there are also an overwhelming amount of differences going on with a guy like Robert Hansen. But the biggest thing that they have in common is they were both driven to kill. When we're dealing, though, with the Zodiac Killer, I mean, I'm sure you guys, if you've followed the Zodiac case, you've seen that there are an enormous amount of books out there about the subject. There are an enormous amount of people coming forward saying their family members did it, or that they have solved the case, they know the identity of the Zodiac Killer. And I think that's another thing that's going to be slowing us down because, I mean, the Zodiac Killer is not Earl Van Best and Jack Torrance at the same time. Horribly unlikely, anyway, that those two are working together. But, people are coming forward and saying that their family members are the Zodiac. I don't really know their exact motivations. Some of them might believe that stuff. Others might just want some sort of spotlight moments, or they might want to just get a book deal. Who knows? People are putting out a lot of stuff online. And one of the things, though, that us, as the kind of armchair investigators, us in the audience, we have to kind of sift through all that, and we can actually kind of be like, hey, wait a second, I don't think that this is adding up. And it's good for us to call them out if we don't believe that their work is genuine, or even if we don't believe certain theories are genuine. So many times I've had comments on my uploads when people tell me something and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't see that. People point stuff out to me that I miss, and it's welcome because it's about gaining a larger understanding. And if you really kind of just ruminate over the same theory over and over again, it will make perfect sense to you. But you get that kind of tunnel vision where you're just you're not seeing anything other than that one particular theory. And it's you're just forcing that into your own sort of belief system. I'm guilty of that to some extent. That's why it's welcome to get things like that in the comments section. Leave some comments on the upload. Challenge these things. But the kind of heart and soul of the upload today is just that we're going to be dealing with probably very similar psychological traits with a lot of serial killers. Notice how they say that so many serial killers are involved with things like hurting animals and setting fires and sexual abuse, all of those things. It's a lot of them are going to have those type of things in their upbringing, and they're also going to be inflicting very similar things upon their victims. It doesn't necessarily mean, though, that they are connected. And we're going to probably have other people try and insinuate that other certain murders might also be linked together. We were just talking about Amber Tuckerow and the Highway of Tears, and someone was thinking that a possible murderer from Arizona could be the murderer of Amber Tuckerow. But once again, that's someone kind of linking things together based on some similarities. Somewhat of a low likelihood, but that stuff's there all the same. One of the cases that I've never explored in any single way would be that of the Long Island serial killer. That might be something that we'll get into on this channel. I kind of got away from serial killers, though, just as a true crime fan. I used to watch that stuff a lot, the serial killer documentaries, and even fall asleep to them at night or something. And I was yeah, it's the last thing you want to listen to right before bed, but it's you just put something on, you need the audio to go to sleep and that, and I watched a lot of those things. But then I really felt that I would so much rather listen to true crime stuff that's going to be talking about trying to solve an unsolved mystery. Part of it, let's not kid ourselves, it's the problem-solving aspect. It's examining a theory. What do you think about this? As opposed to just learning the details about someone's crime. The other part of it is that I almost felt like I was giving too much of a spotlight to people who are involved with absolutely heinous murders. And not just me as a fan, but that kind of our current culture is almost sort of promoting serial killers too much. But at the same time, though, I think there could be a certain value in trying to learn things about something such as the Zodiac Killer, which is an unsolved mystery. We don't know who he was. And that's just human nature, though, to try and strive after the unsolved. Like, when we don't know who the perpetrator was, we're going to try and find out. By we, I mean humanity. Human beings are like that. If we don't know what the answer is, we're going to try and solve the problem. And like on this channel, though, I'm not opposed to covering cases, though, that are about serial killers. I mean, I think that almost anything should be fair game. Like, if people have any suggestions at all, they can drop in the comments section. However, though, I mean, someone mentioned Robert Christian Hansen, though, and it's like, if I don't really believe that he is a genuine suspect, we're just going to call it as we see it, right? We're just going to tell it like it is and be like, hey, I'm not really seeing it right there that there's any connection between Robert Hansen and the Zodiac Killer. There's definitely like the kind of treating people as hunted specimens, for lack of a better word, just like collecting names for your death toll, hunting people down for sport. That angle is there. But guess what? There are probably a lot of other serial killers on the western parts of America and Canada that probably could fit that description. So that's kind of where we are today with this one. It's like, as you see, this is part 2. Those are just some kind of follow-up notes that we had about Robert Hansen. I mean, it's going to be difficult to get through a lot of stuff in the internet age, and people are going to be putting out theories that, not to say that they are liars or things, but just that they aren't lying, but maybe the kind of connections between some of these major level crimes, or these high-profile cases, rather, sometimes those might not be very accurate. So let's see what happens. Some of the other things that we could explore on this channel, I mean, would be some true crime cases from around the world. I like to write to people in different countries. I just ask them, like, hey, are there any sort of major unsolved mysteries from your country? So most of what we've done has really been centered in the U.S. I mean, naturally, because I'm American. But we covered a couple cases from Sweden recently, the stolen meat murders relating to Annika Ersberg, the Atlas vampire murder of Lily Lindström, which we're going to examine very shortly. And, I mean, those, once again, the murder of Lily Lindström is another unsolved case, and I think that we have some very bold things to say about that, so look out for that one over the next couple days. But if there are any sort of serial killer cases that you've dealt with in the past, like, is there something that you would like to discuss a little bit more on the channel? If you have one, you can drop a comment below, and we can have a bit of a discussion. But, we will be very critical. I mean, with the serial killer ones, though, those are more of things like, that's more like commentary. With the Robert Christian Hansen being the Zodiac Killer, though, that's more of a theory that someone had. And, we're going to challenge it. We're going to challenge the theories. Be critical of the theories. When it comes to just like some of the other people, John Wayne Gacy and Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer, those type guys, we kind of would be just more giving commentary on the situation. And I think we'll probably find some similar psychological traits with a lot of those guys. And, similar traits even to the Zodiac Killer might be somewhat similar if we examine it in a certain way. Robert Christian Hansen, if we examine him in a certain way, we could find similar traits between him and John Wayne Gacy, him and Jeffrey Dahmer. It's possible. It's possible. All right, well, that's all for me now. These are just kind of, I said, just the follow-up notes today about what we were talking about last time with Robert Christian Hansen and the Zodiac Killer. Some similarities, a whole lot of differences, and just how the internet is dealing with true crime in general. That's all for me now. Until next time.